video games. What have you guys been playing?
We both finished God of War. Like, let's broach that topic right now. Cookie and I have completed a game.
The same game.
The same game. In the same amount of time. Almost exactly the same amount of time, might I add.
Nice. Did you also play on easy?
No, but it's okay.
Can I ask, did you guys do, not necessarily 100% of the optional shit, because there's a lot of extra stuff you can do, but did you guys do all of the Valkyrie fights?
No. I did half of them.
Were they did they become too difficult?
No, they were a lot of fun, but it's hard to find Valkyries.
I started one of them and then realized that I ain't got time for this shit. I'm playing this on story mode. I'm not trying to struggle with any fight.
I remember since I was playing it on and off, so I started my own, then I watched Tiff play most of it, and I would jump in on some of her saves from time to time just to get like more of a feeling for it. Mm-hmm. And I remember like at one point I was going through some of the Valkyrie fights. Like if I'm not mistaken, you have a few like challenge areas before you hit the Valkyrie areas, or at least in one particular spot I'm thinking of involving a lot of molten lava. You have like a challenge thing you have to get through, and then you hit the Valkyrie shortly after.
Right.
I remember like unconsciously consciously like deciding to put it on easy during one of the challenges just to get through it because I was having some problems.
Mm-hmm.
And some time passed. I went into a Valkyrie fight, and I'm just getting obliterated. I'm like, I remember thinking to myself, I need to like turn down the difficulty so this is...
But it was on easy.
Easier. Yeah, and I was like, oh, well, shit, I guess...
Valkyrie fights are just hard. So it's like, well...
I think it's also one of those scaling things, too, though, where some of those Valkyrie fights, if you enter them with equipment at a certain level, or like your stats at a certain level, which are mostly determined by your equipment, they just become like near impossible. You have to play them to perfection because the amount of damage you take and the amount of damage you give feels not even close to reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely had a Valkyrie fight or two where I went in and I knew I was severely underleveled. So I came back even pretty shortly afterward, maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours of playing the game, upgrading my equipment once, like one level up roughly, coming back and having like a reasonable fight. And then also fighting Valkyrie fights where I was over-equipped, I think, than what the fight needed. I think they definitely have varying difficulties because some of those Valkyrie fights were like 15 tries for me, and some of them were like, oh, a Valkyrie. Oh, they're dead. So I would say that equipment seems to matter a lot. And this game, it's the one complaint I might have about the combat is that the equipment sometimes feels like it's gating you from doing things.
I could see that. I didn't really have that issue, though, because of the aforementioned, I skipped all the Valkyrie fights and also played this game on easy, so it was just like, oh yeah, the next thing, I could not imagine some of these fights on like a harder difficulty, because towards the end, like when you first get the Valkyrie fights unlocked, so you get access to the pick, the ice pick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's when I found my first Valkyrie fight, just by like, oh, I've got this thing
too,
where I can open the doors now. Oh, cool. There's a door right here in this mine shaft that I've already been in. I can go left where I know I need to go, or I can go right real fast just to see what's up. Down an elevator shaft, and it's like, what's that? Oh, this is a Valkyrie. Cool. It hit me like 3 times. Fuck. I am dead.
Yeah.
All right.
My first fight was very similar. Find Valkyrie right after getting the pick. Be like, oh, this looks cool. Is this going to be like a mini boss fight? And then she slaps the shit out of me, like worse than any boss fight I had been in previously. And I go, oh, this isn't for me yet. Like,
I think
better wait.
I'll not struggle with this.
Yeah.
So my one big thing for this game was the fact that there's no traditional jump button, but you're always hitting the jump button.
Right, the interactive on the PlayStation, the X or cross button to climb.
It's actually the circle
jump.
button.
Oh, maybe I actually think I changed my layout then.
Oh, nice.
I'm pretty sure I used a different control layout.
Yeah, no,
Which
I was
I
just
liked.
constantly mashing circle throughout this entire game, basically. It's like, oh, cool. I would like to go to this area, and I know I need to go to this area, but my camera angle's not just the perfect angle to. Oh, now the circle prompt came up when you're just like climbing.
Yeah, I had a couple of those moments where like I didn't get the prompt, but I just hit the action button knowing like this should work, and then it would work. Like it would blindly, like my camera wouldn't even be pointed towards, say, a ledge that I was jumping towards, and I could make the jump without lining it up. But other times when you're doing like the wall traversal, I'm pretty sure it does not let you make that jump until you get that prompt.
It does not let you make that jump until you make that prompt. That was just my issue with the circle button for me.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I would agree that it felt pretty clean, but there was some polishing that could happen.
Just with the traversal, the combat felt nice, but just like I just got tired of pushing circle.
Mm-hmm.
Now, can we get into spoilers?
I think now that we've all finished it, it is story time.
Sweet. So, can I say that your son has the quickest growth story arc of being just like, oh, he's tolerable, just trying to get his dad to love him. What an annoying little shit. Okay, cool. He's back to normal now. Oh, that's who this person is? He is going to be an annoying little shit for the rest of his life.
Almost as if he were going through puberty.
There are also the arguments that he goes from barely being able to fire a bow to being like a archery master in a couple hours.
Higgs, yeah.
I mean, we don't know how long Kratos is in that weird I don't remember what they call it.
In the Pillar of Light.
Yeah.
He was gone for a while, but That was actually pretty good. And then at that point, I think I'm ready to become a dad now. After Kratos was like, if it makes you feel any better. I really only thought it was gone for like 5 minutes, yo.
Yeah, I mean, who else was inspired to become a dad from God of War? The tale we can all tell our children. A game came out in 2018 that was a real life changer for me. It made me realize I'm ready for the responsibility of taking care of my kid.
And I love how we all just kind of ignore the fact that this is Kratos' second family, or third family, technically, I guess, if you count the first two families that he killed.
I mean, the idea here is that
Kratos leaves to get some milk every once in a while, and we get a new game from it.
They kind of do like sweep away his past to some degree. I mean, they do end up acknowledging it.
They acknowledge he killed all the gods, but everyone just completely ignores the fact that his skin color was because he was cursed with the ashes of his family that he murdered.
And it would be fair to say that although they delve like deeply into the consequences of his actions, they really have very little to say about his history.
But I mean, what can you do about those families that were literally written to be killed off, you know?
Right. And that's fair to say. Like they were fridged so we could have the original God of War games. And the fact that the game's even trying to address in its storyline like growth and like I don't want to say retribution, like growth, development, and like rebirth of Kratos and his like values and storyline is probably the best we can ask for in writing that story. And the way that they handle it is very good.
And as much as we want to like think about the whole history of the franchise, like much like when we're thinking about things like Star Wars or Star Trek, like I think we are doing a disservice to that particular game. We should be focusing on like that singular entry if we want to dictate whether or not like the game was good or the story was good. And I think they do a great job. Like granted, you don't have a whole lot to work with from the past games because a lot of the story is just basically excuses for violence. Not saying that violence is bad or anything, or that like it necessarily, but you get what I'm saying, right? Like they
Right,
basically
yeah.
were like, how could we come up with a story that we could have this character fight Greek gods? And they came up with a serviceable one. But when they're trying to like tell this narrative that's far more serious now, like aside from acknowledging his past in that regard, like I don't think there's much else you can do. And then bring the vision of Athena.
No, I like it, and
they do a great job of like I didn't personally see this coming from far away, but having the son turn out to essentially be Loki was very
Low key a god.
yeah.
as soon as they mentioned that his mother was a giant, I was like, holy shit, he's Loki, isn't he? Because he's the reason that Baldur dies and Ragnarok starts in Norse mythology.
Right. Tiffany essentially had the same reaction too, where she got like since she studied Norse mythology, before. The pieces came together pretty neatly in a way that someone that's like even
Kind of interested in it. It's like, holy shit,
enthusiastic about it. Yeah, you can definitely piece it together pretty quickly. I mean, likewise, like who would have guessed mistletoe was Baldur's, weakness? Well,
Yeah.
anyone that fucking knows Norse mythology.
Is like, that's
It is a cool fucking pantheon, I have to say. Like, I don't know a huge amount about Norse mythology, and getting to hear and like learn a lot of those stories or the mythos was very, very cool for a player who, like, if you're
'Cause we
just
get-
stumbling about in the world, you still learn a lot about it, which is neat.
because is this like really the first big game that involves Norse mythology? Because we've got like a shit ton of Greek mythology, because all the Assassin's Creed games are pretty much just based in Greece.
I'm sure there are some
Apotheon is,
Viking games that address it to some extent. Fire Emblem Genealogy of War also has references to Norse mythology as well. But they also like don't shy away from putting their own spin on it. Like I don't remember if this was in the last episode or not, or if it was like off air, so to speak. But Baldur is definitely not like some drunk backyard wrestling guy in the mythology. He is like
oh,
the
you
fucking
did mention that.
yeah. He's the fucking golden boy. Like everyone loves Baldur, and
Mhm.
in this universe, everyone hates Baldur.
Yeah, no, he's Uncle Baldur in this one.
I
Had
don't
too
want to
much
wrestle
drink
Uncle.
yeah.
And I will say, after his like death, I love how I like the way the almost called them gnomes, the brothers. Who are the brothers?
They're dwarves.
I love the fact that the dwarves were like,
Sindri and Brock.
yeah, I love the fact that they were like talking about the weather, and they're being like, yeah, no, prophecy said that this is gonna be the long one. It's weird though; it shouldn't happen for another like millennia, because Loki's supposed to be full grown before he finds out that mistletoe's the thing, and then trick the blind god into shooting him with mistletoe. Because fuck it.
Mm-hmm.
But no, it was a.
Also, the messiness at time like works to the advantage of the game, doesn't it? Like, I really, really enjoy that, and it seems to be the case in Norse mythology. But once again, I am like probably the least experienced on that. But the whole like things will happen, things have happened, things are happening. Like the past, future, and present tense are all very messy. Which makes like the storytelling actually really cool, because you're very like, until you see it with your own eyes, you're like, so is this something that's is this something upcoming I should be like looking out for? Or did this already happen? And even, when your very good boy reads the like, what do they call those like tableaus that they have? When he reads the cabinets that have the history, it's like some of it is like history / prophecy, and the whole time playing the game, it absolutely kept me on my toes of like, what the fuck? Like, we know what's going to happen, but at the same time, it's already happened at times, and I'm confused as to where we're at on like the time continuum.
They were triptychs. That's the word you're looking for.
Thank you.
The thing the boy reads are triptychs. For those who aren't art majors, a triptych is a series of images placed on 3 panels that usually open up in like a cabinet type manner, with an image on one side, an image in the middle, and an image on the other side. 3 images. Triptych. Usually telling a story. Sorry.
No, this is actually, I think that's the best content we've produced so far.
Sorry.
Fancy Ramen aims to be an educational podcast, and that is why we get that Department of Education funding every week. Well, hey, I think if we take enough snippets of me throwing in some science knowledge, Cookie throwing in the art major expertise, and you complaining about audio engineering, like we could say it's a multidisciplinary STEAM project, science, technology, engineering, arts, mathematics.
Woot.
I mean, what other thoughts did you guys have on God of War? Like, I'm so distanced from the game. I think I've stated most of my big things.
I'm just so satisfied at the character growth throughout the game. I honestly wanted to throw my son off of a fucking cliff when he started to play like edgelord son and treat people poorly, and like just seeing that there was almost there was a near immediate consequence to his actions of being a little shit, and his like immediate acknowledgement and attempt to rectify his bad behavior. Like, I really, really enjoyed that. I thought the game also just had excellent pacing on the story. It concluded faster than I thought. Like, I don't know what I was expecting, but I thought maybe God of War 2018 really is just like a standalone game, and so I thought we would be confronting Odin at some point in time instead of major spoilers obviously have been released throughout this discussion, so it's a little late now, but the fact that like Baldur is really your final scrap, it caught me by surprise actually. But the pacing's very good. I always felt on my toes when I was following the regular story, but the like amount and frequency of side quests that I took on really made the passage of time seem incredibly like reasonable and rational, minus the fact that we never slept, you know. I guess I slept all those times I died in combat and reloaded.
Did you go back to your house after beating the game?
Yeah, and then I slept until Ragnarok, apparently.
Exactly.
Eggs, yeah.
Oh, yeah, we're gods, so maybe they don't have to really sleep.
I mean, that's kind of the idea, since, you are gods. The passage of time through like a daily, like a human day is way different, right? Like, they probably go millennia without sleeping, and when a god sleeps, it's probably, or it is a big deal.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense, actually. That's very lucky for them that works out.
Because it makes good this time, video games.
It makes story and mechanical sense, but I'm sure it was something that they just didn't bother considering, because this isn't the type of game where I think your general audience would want to be bothered with
camping,
like feeding and sleeping and all that. Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
the item management, honestly, if they streamlined the items and equipment more, I would be happy with it. I think this game doesn't benefit from like
the more in-depth RPG elements.
Yeah, I mean, I picked up probably 70% of the treasure, and the like runes that I picked up, I sold anything that wasn't unique, and then the unique ones, there were 2 categories of unique. There was either like ultra specific unique, where unless I'm having difficulty with a fight, I should use them in order to tweak my chances, or like generally just very good unique, where it was like you get invulnerability that recharges after this like delay in time, or you just get these percentage increases to your damage or proccing your like frost or burn stats. Like those are definitely better than the you get 30% poison resist unless you're fighting something with poison.
Yeah. I will say, getting a little bit back into the story, with your thing about the consequences of your son learning that he's a god, I thought it was really nice that you stopped getting control of him and he just became real useless in a fight for the most part. Like all the synergy went downhill.
Yeah,
for me, at
that's
least.
true.
When he first learned how to be, then he was like, "Oh yeah, I'm a god. Okay, old man, I do what I want." And he's like, "I'm gonna go attack this dude." He's like, okay, I guess we're fighting now. That's cool. And then every once in a while, it's like, "Oh, I could really use a stun right." Nah, I don't. He's not listening to me. I could really use you to shot that. I guess we're just going to struggle bus for the rest of this fight. Okay.
I totally agree. I thought that was really, really smart, and it was noticeable only after a little bit of time, right? Like I didn't notice it.
Like the first two
at
fights, you're like
first.
fine, and then the third and fourth fights, you're like, okay, yeah, something's different.
Yeah, you feel something's off, which is cool. That like means that the mechanic is really reflecting the story, which is, I don't know. I think that's just sweet. That's a neat thing to have.
So, and I do have questions for you, Scott, as someone who tackled the side quest.
Yes.
How was like Gendry and them? How was the side quest stories?
Not that great.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't feel like you're really missing out on all that much. There's like background and lore that I thought was cool, but overall, if I were to play the game again, I wouldn't feel bad about skipping most all of the side quests. I also didn't do. I think it's Niflheim or Niflheim. I don't remember. I think it's Niflheim, which is the like shadowy poison maze. It's a cursed maze. I thought that I did not like that area at all. I didn't explore it at all. I did some of the challenges in the lava domain, and I didn't do enough to get to where Neil or Tiff got with the Valkyrie. I also just kind of called it quits after, I think, 5 challenges or so.
Okay, that's good, because I was just like, side stories. I'm here to beat this. I'm here to finish this game's main story. And then I saw New Game Plus, and I think I discussed that a little bit last week, where it's just like, do all games need New Game Plus? What does New Game Plus get you for God of War?
Completionist opportunities, I would say. I don't think there's anything else that would be tempting.
Does the difficulty ramp up?
I don't think so. I think you get to carry everything into the next game, so you could theoretically choose to increase the difficulty.
See, and I'd understand a New Game Plus if I beat it on like the hardest difficulty, and it was for a difficulty increase.
Right, like when you beat Fire
on
Emblem the first time, they go from like hard to legendary in some cases, or insanity or whatever they call it. Not in Three Houses, which is the most recent, but a lot of games do that. Mass Effect did that too, I think.
But I played in story mode. They should not have been offering me a New Game Plus. They should have said, "Cool,
would you like to try the game in easy mode now?"
Exactly. It's like, cool. You beat the game. You can now, the world opens up, or you can up the difficulty, you pansy.
That is it both has the New Game Plus as restart the game, but they also have like continue the adventure options. There are 2 ways to play.
I understood the continue the adventure option for this game. It actually makes sense because they had a very clear goal. Drop off Ashes, highest mountain peak.
Yeah.
After they did that, it was like, world's your oyster. You guys are gods. Do what you want. A lot of games, it's like, oh, cool, we got done beating the big bad boss. And so why are there still enemies around? This game's like, oh, the enemies were just
have always been
demons and
around.
shit.
Yeah.
And just the fact that it lets you, in comparison to like what is otherwise my favorite like video game, Breath of the Wild, which I really wish had like a post conclusion exploration option.
Oh yeah, I guess it doesn't. It just kind of loads you right back into the right before Ganon's room.
Yep.
Yeah. And then you crawl around the top part of that castle and realize that there's like 12 Korok seeds just outside his door.
Oh, really?
Yeah, last time I played, I loaded it up and I was right at Ganon's tower. And I ended up like climbing around, and I probably found 12 is an exaggeration, but I probably found like 5 or 6 Korok challenges within like that very small space of the top of the tower. It was pretty cool. They were all fairly challenging too.
Nice.
Would this
Sweet.
have been your game of 2018 had you played it
No.
then?
I
What
don't
other games
remember.
came out in 2018?
I'm
That's so
struggling
long
to
ago.
remember what my
It would've-
game of the year was.
My game was Smash, I believe.
I think mine was either Smash or when did Zelda come out? I don't know what my game of the
Zelda
year
was
last year.
2017. It was March like 20-something, 2017.
Yeah, I don't know. But this would have been up there. It was definitely really good.
Mm-hmm.
Makes me sad that I was kind of like avoiding it for fear of my PlayStation 4 breaking.
Yeah,
I
let's
have-
see.
I have a really bad reputation with God of War games.
No, I get you. I remember the talk.
So it's like, yeah, it's new systems are coming out next year. I'm definitely going to made a
Octopath
New Year's
Traveler was
resolution.
last year,
That didn't make my game of the year though.
but
made a
it
New
did
Year's
make
resolution.
Neil's.
Did it? It very well could have.
I think it was at least an honorable mention by me, and it may have made your top 3.
I mean,
It made it
it's-
on my list.
It's kind of sad because 2018, I kind of have forgotten so much of what was relevant then because it still gets overshadowed so much by 2017.
2017 was a big fucking year, and I think 2020 will probably be similar. The indie games that came out that year probably were the bigger, like those probably attracted more attention or were the bigger, more important games to release, because we have Dead Cells, which was a huge like
Oh, yeah.
sort of roguish game, Celeste, which is now like one of the dominant speedrunning games. Return of the Obra Dinn. Did you play that, Neil? You
I
played
didn't,
that, right?
not yet. It's on
No.
my wish list.
It is, yeah, it is absolutely on top of my like wish list as well as The Messenger. A lot of these indie games I actually picked up
Ooh, yeah,
at the beginning
Messenger.
of 2019, but they were very good.
Oh man. Oh, are we going to be doing a game of the year?
We
Cast?
will, but I
Just
need
not
some,
sure when we're going to do it yet.
Yeah,
Okay.
Could be
I think I
later
know
this
what
week
my game of
or
the year is.
end of the week or Saturday, whenever.
Who knows? Either way. So, what else have we been playing?
Neil, take the wheel.
Scott, you couldn't get to Darkest Dungeon last week, so why don't you go on that?
Oh, that's right. Man, okay, Darkest Dungeon is an older game for sure. I just have been playing a lot of it after finishing up after I finished up the Outer Worlds and God of War, like playing these really big games that, you know, when you boot them up, you are back in the middle of something. And the much more like piecemeal, grindy nature of Darkest Dungeon, where you can hop in and do a single delve for like 30 minutes, was really like refreshing after doing some bigger story-based games. This game is, I've spoken about it maybe a little bit. I believe you've played it, Neil.
And me.
Oh, you've also played Cookie. Okay, yeah. I was actually brought into this by friend of the pod, Matt. He got me to try out Darkest Dungeon. And the last time I played it before I picked it up this time, I think it is entirely fair to say I was absolute dog shit at the game. Just very, very bad. Partially because I cared about my characters. Which is a mistake, especially in the early stages when they're very fragile and you don't understand how they work yet. But as I have picked it up now, rolling off of a save that was like over a year old and maybe a third into the progression of the game outside of the actual dungeon dives, right? Because the darkest dungeon you have to complete 4 times, I believe, with different party members. Your party members are, I don't know what happens. I just know that they're like scarred for life once they do the darkest dungeon dive, and so you can't reuse them. If I have read that correctly from like forums and other people's comments. But returning to the game, just 2 things that are really cool about it. Are first, mechanically, it's one of the few games I've played that has a lot of like positioning and movement like structured within the actual combat as ways to both like give yourself an advantage or be put at a disadvantage by the enemy, because it will lock out your different move sets, for instance, and it also increases the vulnerability of your characters depending on what position they're in. Normally, if you're in the front 2 rows, you're going to be taking more attacks overall with higher damage, and in the back 2 rows, you may be exposed to more stress. But also normally, I think it's more like single target attacks or like full party AoEs that can really hit you. So it's very different from just taking like a crushing like 20 points of damage on the front line. And so managing your character's positioning, especially with a lot of characters in the game that are very cool with their abilities, like they have a lot of utility with buffing, debuffing their own movement, but fragile health and protection and dodging. Like having your gravedigger who sits at the back of your party, who is not established to attack on the front lines at all, getting pulled to the front is like an honestly terrifying situation in combat sometimes. And then the enemies that use movement to their advantage, there is a type of mini boss that literally every turn just moves back a space and fills an enemy in front of it. There are a couple that follow this archetype, but there's one in particular. And so like your damage dealing becomes less and less effective as they just fill up the map and spam the space ahead of them to prevent you from moving them closer. Like the use of movement in this game reminds me of playing Child of Light, which did either of you guys play Child of Light a couple of years back when it came out?
I didn't complete it, but I played some.
So you know that game, your characters are stationary, but it is similar to a lot of those traditional like turn-based RPG combats where they're in fixed positions and they have like obviously pretty concrete roles on how they operate, but you can mess with the timing of characters by blinding enemies or like boosting how quickly your allies move on the lineup. And this game reminds me of that in the same way that like your positioning can completely change the effectiveness of all of your other abilities, even if it's not actually a direct like debuff or buff to the characters that are being shifted in position. I've started to make like I've noticed with playing the game more and how I think more experienced players talk about it, that this is like a game where building a very mobile or like synergistic team with mobility is just like absolutely brutal for the game's AI, even on the harder difficulties at times. Because if you can move the enemies to your benefit, or when the enemies scramble you, you're not fucked wasting turns shuffling people back into positions where they can actually take actions. Because if they don't take actions, they take stress, which is honestly worse than damage for your character. It's so much harder to heal. Then that mobility just gives you just like this massive advantage on top of an already, I think, very satisfying and like relatively tight but complex set of like combat options.
It's funny. I feel like we've gone full circle now because Darkest Dungeon was a game I like spoke to at great lengths when we were starting out, and now we've come to the point where you, granted not through me but through Matt, have finally given Darkest Dungeon like enough time to really feel out the depth of its design. It's
Yeah.
interesting too because like the game changed significantly. I bought it when it was in pre-release or what is it even called now? I never buy games in
Early access.
Yeah, early access.
Early access.
I hardly ever now.
Steam Greenlight.
It's very interesting hearing your stance on it, your position on the game, because it has changed so much from the early days of early access. Like straight down to at one point in time, the stress mechanic worked in a far simpler way where there basically was no heart attack.
Oh.
Oh, that
But-
changes things.
So you could really abuse it potentially to try and eke out benefits,
given the amount
virtues.
I've played, like since this is a game I like consistently come back to here and
Yeah.
there because you can absolutely pick it up and play it for like 1 or 2 dungeons and let it go. My problem, and I could be absolutely wrong, but I remember the stress. I don't remember what it's called when you get 100 stress.
Yeah, I don't know exactly either, but it's an affliction more or
Yeah.
less. Like you have a virtue or you have a I don't remember what that's called. It
I
might
can't
be an
either.
affliction.
Like, back then, it felt like the virtue percentage was like 5%. Like you almost never got it.
yeah.
And it also felt that the negative effects you would get from that affliction once you hit 100 stress was always way worse than it was now. For in the negative effect in action, you can lose turns occasionally, or you can have
You can do damage to yourself. You can do stress damage to all of your allies, or like massive stress damage to an ally in particular.
in the old days. It felt more like an avalanche was about to happen. Like if you got one person to 100 stress,
You're waiting for your party to crumble.
yeah, you're going to have 100 stress on someone else in a couple turns, and that felt like it brought up like a couple instances where I intentionally let a character die because I would rather have them dead than afflicted, and I felt that. That was almost like a
don't think
more
that's
interesting
wrong.
thing now. Whereas, like, if someone becomes stressed and becomes sadistic or whatever, masochistic or something, it like really doesn't hurt you that much anymore.
I don't know.
It's like a minor inconvenience now, as opposed to like we're basically fucked convenience. But there are like a few other changes too that have drastically altered the way you play that game. I don't necessarily think it got worse. I think it's gotten better with all the new content and objectives that they kicked in. But it has been a really cool game to see like things unfold. Certain parties were like broken in the initial builds, and now like you said, like your mobility, and that goes both ways. That is absolutely like the party to go with. Mobility, the ability to control the enemy's mobility, and then your own mobility through the course of actions.
Yeah, there are maybe 2 or 3 abilities in the game that let you move backwards after something, and that backwards movement is a godsend when you get shuffled.
Yep, absolutely.
It's insane.
It's interesting because at least when I last played, I'm sure they might have added a couple more characters. The classes that actually have a legitimate ability to heal your party or a party member tend to have a lack of mobility.
Yes, yeah.
And it's such a trade-off because like I don't know if it necessarily teaches you this, because sometimes even just having that one character that has that lack of mobility in exchange for sustain is all you need. But like you can go glass cannon and just fill your party up with bounty hunter. What's the one with the top hat, the woman that throws the daggers? I can't recall.
That is the Gravedigger, and one of my favorite classes.
Go Gravedigger, Bounty Hunter. I'm trying to remember who else. You could basically just pick
The
up.
Highwayman, who is the
because
rogue.
he's got the
Point blank
gun
shot.
skill that will move
Yeah.
him back one, right?
Yes,
And he also has the dance, which will move him forward. Or not dance. It's like
it's a thrust or
yeah,
whatever.
It's crazy. I don't know if it's still true now, but it certainly felt like they did a good job of balancing out different phases of the game for different parties. Like
Mhm.
early on, you can just fucking steamroll through with Vestals and Paladins.
Mhm.
And then like you have to become more intricate and purposeful in your team comps as it gets harder and
Yeah.
harder.
Your team composition needs to be more and more technical, I feel, the harder the dungeons or situations you go into. Like, it's possible to brute force any of the easy stuff. If you have if you have just a small amount of luck and like you're about as well equipped as you can be for the situation. But when I go into the boss fights, for instance, where you're fighting the like big bad monstrosity at the end of a long dungeon, I don't think there are almost any of those fights where not having like a particular party composition is like if you don't have a defined intent with how your party functions from like a 1 to 3 turn cycle, then you're probably going to get wrecked by the time you get to the boss. Because the way that the bosses work is they work on those intentional 1 to 3 turn cycles. And you need to choose a loadout that is going to be complementary to countering that boss cycle. Because I've definitely made the mistake of bringing in fighters, or I should say a team that does a lot of frontline damage, and then you fight the boss that is always shifting to the back line, and it's like, oh, cool. It's possible to win this, but it's going to be a much, much more difficult uphill battle than if I have a bounty hunter or an occultist who can just like pull that boss back into my range, or I have folks that are focusing on just striking the back range at all times. It's a great game. It's I think the little note that I put in here is it is a game where the more successful you are, the fact that the dungeon builds in difficulty and like the amount of things and challenges that they throw at you increase, it almost becomes more stressful to do well in the game. Because once you've invested into any of your champions, like a fatal blow or like a crippling setback is, I think, way more punishing than when you're using disposable pawns. And you're like, well, that jester wasn't that great anyway, so it's fine if I just like shoo him out of the like catalog, or he dies from a heart attack in this battle. Now that I have characters that are level 5 and 6, I'm like, dear God, I will do anything to keep this Vestal alive, you know?
My only complaint about the game, I'm sure it's one I brought up before, and I know they addressed it in one way, but the idea that you basically have no recourse for hiring on your level 0 adventurers and just having them go on treasure hunts where you send them into a mission. You don't care if they live as long as someone gets
Brings
out
back
alive.
treasure, yeah.
Yep. And then you fucking just kick them out and then hire new ones on.
Right.
I know they kind of did away with a bit of that by doing the hardest difficulty. I think there's a time limit. But I think
there's a number of like weeks or whatever you have.
time limit, that just seems like such a shit resolution or solution to that problem. Like I feel this way about Fallout 1 for as well, by the way, where you have a fucking time limit to, finishing the game. Like time limit with RPG just doesn't feel like a well thought out plan. Like if they had even done something like you need to use your resources to hire people, it would have made the game, it would have like done away with the necessity of having a time limit, and it would stop people from abusing the fact that you basically can get infinite funds and resources by throwing
the cannon
people
fodder
in.
approach. I think the only modification I noticed playing this game now versus I think when I very first started was as you progress in, I think, like resources and funding, and even say party skills, it seems like the number of easy or even like semi-reasonable endeavors for the low-level characters are limited to like maybe 1 or 2, or sometimes I have like no green missions appear. It's all yellow for level 3 recommended or red for level 5 recommended. And so it's like you can send them on a hunt, but you're probably going to get 2 rooms in and then just absolutely wrecked if you do those.
But the point, though, is that you could send those level 0s on that death mission. And if they hit a treasure room first or even a chest, you've already succeeded. Like, you can just escape right away. Because there's no penalty to it unless you're playing on the hardest difficulty, which at times I don't think feels as satisfying. It's the hardest difficulty sometimes feels really unfair.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm pretty sure that mode has some sort of warning like this is going to feel unfair, but it's still, I think it's only for the most like masochistic of us to enjoy. I
absolutely
could not see myself enjoying that. I already like the normal difficulty, the dark dungeon, not the darker or darkest options. So
you've convinced me to re-download this on the Switch.
It is so well adapted for the Switch too. That is such a great platform for it. The only complaint,
can take it on the go.
Yeah, exactly, because you can take it on the go. The only complaint I have is that like keyboard mouse is obviously probably faster at navigating menus and whatnot. Like there are some nuisances with the Switch, but the portability, I think, is probably like that counters any of the complaints I have about the control scheme.
Yeah, just to make sure, is that all you had for Darkest Dungeon?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm just very satisfied that I was able to lure Cookie back in. I've been so happy with revisiting the game. Honestly, no, I think it's a great choice. I was surprised at how much I was enjoying it and how much time I was dumping into it after I booted it back up. Because the thing that got me was just on a whim, like, oh, I only have an hour or less to play. Well, why don't I play Darkest Dungeon? And, because I hadn't played in so long, I'm like, I better look like really closely at the rules and mechanics again because I haven't done this in a while. And I just felt like I had a bit of a breakthrough or like an epiphany on how to play. And it's made it so much more fun than the first couple times I jumped into it.
Nice. Because I'm trying to figure out a way to get away from Slay the Spire. It's consuming everything I've got.
Right. But I'm sorry, man. It sounds like that game is inescapably addictive.
Oh my God, it's so good.
Slay the Spire was 2019 or 2018?
It was in early access earlier, right? We talked about this last week to some extent. The
so.
release.
We did. I think it came out officially in
This
2019 everywhere, but it originally came out in 2017.
Oh, as early access, and the official release was this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, that game has received nothing but praise from the the gamer group I'm close with. They fucking love it, and you do too. So I respect
perfect
it.
score on Steam.
Is there actually a story to this game?
Not that I can find out. Progress report. I've now beaten it with 2 of the 3 characters you can beat it with. And every
Which
time
ones?
So the first guy, that's like real simple mechanics.
And then the witch or the orb?
The orb guy, whose mechanics I now understand to like a fault. It is beautiful how weirdly he works. And when your deck just clicks, everything just clicks. But every time you slay the Spire, if you slay the Spire with a new character, like you get this little in splash screen that's got the 3 characters' emblems. And the first time you slay the Spire with the 1 character, his emblem lights up. So now I've got 2 out of the 3 emblems lit up. What happens when I do the 3rd? I do not know.
The Spire slays you.
But it's pretty cool. Like every time that you end up beating it, you have to attack this heart. And you do a certain amount of damage to the heart. I don't know what it's... I'm not sure what the damage is going towards, but it says you've done this much damage this time to the heart. You have done this much damage to the heart in your lifetime. This is how much damage has been done to the Spire throughout the game. Doesn't say how much health the Spire has. And I don't know how to do more or less damage the 3 times I've beaten it. I've done different amounts of damage each time. Beaten it twice with the first character, and had drastically different builds and did drastically different amounts of damage. I've learned that the orb guy, he works best if you just get all the defensive things, because his orbs are like a passive ability of actually just attacking for him automatically. So if you're not taking damage and you're just passively doing damage, you're good. But yeah, so no, I'll download Darkest Dungeon to kind of wean myself off of Slay the Spire for a little bit. I need to figure out what other games I want to start playing. But yeah, that's my life.
Well, so just really quickly, I want to get 2 games out of the way.
Yeah.
All the winter sales are going on, and a collection or whatever for Castlevania. Well, both of these collections are on sale now on the PlayStation Store, which is I think the only way you can get them. One collection has like all of every Castlevania before Rondo of Blood, and then the other collection is Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night. For some background, Rondo of Blood is the precursor to Symphony of the Night. I had never played it before because I think it was a Saturn game. I could be wrong on that. Instead, I had played quite a bit of Dracula X, which was the SNES port. And now playing Rondo of Blood, I realized that 1, this game is way more difficult than Dracula X. And 2, that this game is definitely the better version because there's actually like optional routes to take and little secrets. There's even cutscenes with some of the worst voiceover I've ever heard, but also like impressive, I'm sure, for that day and age. But one of the surprising things is that you can actually get a second character that you can just play as, and it's Maria. She's from Symphony of the Night as well, or in that game. And funny enough that like you have Richter Belmont, who's absolutely the best Belmont aside from Julius. Like all of the moveset in Smash is based on Richter's moveset, not Simon. Fuck Simon. Get out of here. So obviously like the second best Belmont, badass. He has like some really awesome. He's one of the first, maybe not the first, but he can use like special abilities with each of the weapons that you pick up using it's called like an item crash or weapon crash. So like there's a lot of cool things about his character, and if you want to think of like the game mechanics as his actual power, he's absolutely like one of the better characters in the series. But then you get Maria, who's like this little girl, and she's a magician, and she's actually like 50 times better than Richter Belmont in this game. In the game that is like Richter's game, you get this little girl magician who's like got to be like 10 years old, but like just from a gameplay standpoint is significantly better, even though all of her weapons are also like very kid-like. Like she gets a cat that just all the cat does is just run forward in a straight line, and the cat will hit enemies multiple times and also pass through enemies. So the cat can just clear out rooms full of enemies for you. You get
just
like
line them up and you cat them.
Yeah, basically. You get a spell that will slow down time, which is infinitely stronger than anything Richter has. Richter has, I think, one way to slow down time too, but it's like a really hard to find item. I've only found it through happen chance, through like killing enemies, which is completely random. She has like a turtle shell that will just guard her, make her basically invincible. Like you could set down the controller and go eat dinner and come back and she'll be fine inside this turtle shell, which makes a lot of like areas of these maps extremely easy to pass through because you don't have to worry about damage with the turtle shell. And then her basic attack, she releases doves. And it's kind of like 2 boomerang doves that just fly forward as far as Richter's whip does. But she releases 2 of them, or can release 2 of them at once, and they come backwards to her too. So you could theoretically hit an enemy 4 times in the same amount of time that Richter would only get 1 hit off. But anyways, though, like aside from that, the game's really fun. I can't get past the second stage because it's that difficult, and it's hard adjusting back to like the more sticky movement, you could say, like the very strict movement of the original Castlevanias. So I put that aside. I'll probably spend a lot more time trying to get through the second stage or third stage. Sorry, I got through the second stage. This game also doesn't have bosses like the original Castlevanias, where if you have the right weapon type, you can just delete bosses. Like it's a lot more. All of the bosses are designed with the intention of making them actually difficult, regardless of what weapon choice you go into, which I think is like kind of a flaw, but also kind of a fun like trick that you have in the other Castlevania games, where it's like, well, I have holy water. This boss is going to go down in 5 seconds. A little different now. And then Symphony of the Night, like it's been a long time since I picked up this game, and going back to it has been like kind of a joy. Like it's been a nostalgia trip, but it's also kind of taught me, or like cemented the fact that while it does have its flaws, it's still absolutely my favorite Metroidvania title. It starts you off when you play as Richter. Like it's kind of like you play the end of Rondo of Blood. You play as Richter and you get this character with all sorts of awesome, crazy moves. Then you play as Alucard immediately after Richter kills Dracula, immediately after from a gameplay standpoint. And Alucard is full powered at this point. He has a bunch of different spells. He has special moves and so forth. You can put in like Street Fighter button combinations to do different things with Alucard, which is like really sweet. And then as soon as you get in and see death for the first time, he strips you of all of your abilities. So it's like that mechanic that happens in many games where you're super powered, then plot device happens, and now you don't even have a sword, and all you can do is punch things. And
or
so,
Metroid, where you're barely powered, and then you lose all of that.
Yeah. So you go through the whole process of getting to see your full capability, and then having to regain that power again. That's been fun. Putting all that aside, though, I finished Katana Zero, and while we talked a lot about the game mechanics last week, we didn't talk about the story, because the story is something that I think as soon as you talk about anything gives away a lot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, even talking about the mechanics could like using any of the story explanation for the mechanics could honestly jeopardize some of the story, or at least spoil some revelations.
So obviously spoilers. I don't know how much time you have left, but like I've got maybe like another 10 minutes or so.
I'm good.
Katana Zero, the game opens up. We're not exactly sure who you're playing as. And again, I'm going to get into spoilers really fast. So if you're interested in this game at all, maybe you should turn off or avoid it for now, because I think this will be our last topic.
Yeah. And it's a game worth
actually,
checking out.
For once in my life, I don't want to hear spoilers. So,
are you going to cut off, or should we end?
Nope, I will cut off. You do your thing, because Lord knows I don't listen to our podcast. So I will sign out and send you my file.
Cookie, remember to download the episode, though.
Of course. Always download, never listen. But yes, have fun. I'll send you the thing. Bye, everybody. Remember,
farewell.
Tip your
See ya,
waitress.
Cookie.
Fancy ramen.
Merry Christmas.
Out. Merry Christmas. Bye.
So I'm going to quickly just say I don't think there's any consequence in this game, with the exception of one particular the choice where you choose to either die or live.
Your gold silver choice, yeah. Did that feel good or bad?
That was okay, and even that was really shitty, because it's just if you choose to die, which like from a standpoint of like you're immortal, and this could actually be a real death. Maybe that is the better option, especially if that means that the little girl that lives next door is safe. Like that, I feel like they should have had an epilogue to that.
But okay, we're in spoiler territory. It's all fair game.
Yeah.
But the little girl doesn't exist, Neil.
Are you sure about that? I think the little girl might exist, actually.
I think the little girl doesn't exist.
So there's a possibility that the little girl is Zero, which is your character's name. It's the code number. He's part of the Gamma Squadron of Nulls.
Yeah.
There's a possibility that she doesn't exist, but there's also a possibility that just maybe there's something more. I don't know. One of my theories is, I think, maybe more supported by the game, which is that the little girl is some sort of figment of his imagination. His memories are essentially the memories he has either suppressed or been brainwashed to forget are embodied or like have created this little girl, right?
Right, and he may be manifesting their actions subconsciously.
But I feel like the two dolls might indicate something otherwise. I'm not entirely sure. The girl does not show up in the memory. Like, the full memory we get at the end of the game shows us that Zero, the main character who's otherwise known as Dragon, but then turns out not to potentially be Dragon.
I think definitely isn't Dragon.
Well, I mean, we get the sense that 15's supposed to be Dragon, but like there's only one person that confirms him to be Dragon, and it's 15. I'm just saying that like the name Dragon and the identity Dragon like are lost at this point, like because many people are calling Zero Dragon, and 15 is the only person who calls himself Dragon, and then Zero calls him Dragon as well. But who's to say that like that the term has to be about one specific person?
Mm-hmm.
But in any case, you finally get the full dream, or like the memory, if you will, and it's 0 and 15 basically are destroying a town, and the vision of the boy and the machine and the doctor. Wait, is there even a doctor in the final dream? I just saw this, or the final vision. I just saw this like 2 hours ago, and I can't remember now.
I didn't see it for a while now.
In any case, though, the girl isn't even present in that dream, but the Leviathan is. And the Leviathan is the doll that he actually has in his apartment. So he took it with
the blue
him.
doll, yeah.
But Behemoth, he ends up like having physical possession of Behemoth afterwards too, after meeting the little girl. So where does Behemoth come from? And is Behemoth actually there? I forgot to look for Behemoth and the Leviathan in his apartment after it was broken into. And why would his apartment be broken into? There's also the vision at the very end of the game with comedy and tragedy, the two masks holding the little girl captive.
Okay, and just to note that Leviathan and Behemoth are in blue and gold text, and you have Silver Mask and Gold Mask, who have the same text associations as well. So they're, I mean, like the potential overlap between Leviathan and Behemoth and maybe the two masked men, there's potential that they're representative of one another in one way.
They like it's so hard to accept anything that this game has to offer as concrete proof of ever happening or occurring, with the exception of the past now.
Do you feel like some of your player agency was stolen from you, even though you actually never had agency?
Yeah, I feel like no choices ever mattered. I played very obediently up until the game forces you not to be obedient.
Mm-hmm.
And it I don't think it made any difference. So I did read that there's a secret ending.
I experimented with both. Okay, go ahead with the secret ending.
So I didn't, or not secret ending, sorry, secret boss. The ending is the fucking same, but all you have to do is basically be as aggressive as possible to the psychiatrist and do specific options when the time comes, and then you get to fight what is more or less a weird optional boss that I don't think is canon, where the psychiatrist becomes this huge flesh mountain beast thing that
weird.
Doesn't feel part of the game at all. It takes
like a hallucination.
Yeah, I watched it and it just doesn't look fucking correct. It doesn't look like the game at all. Aside from looking grotesque, which is whatever, but it just didn't really fit the aesthetic of the game to begin with, or the encounters as far as I felt. So it's safe to assume that that's probably not canon, because if the psychiatrist could become this giant ass monster, then why wouldn't he have done that? And the ending of the boss fight even seems to indicate that maybe the protagonist was just imagining it too. And in any case, though, if we think that comedy and tragedy, the two masked men, are just figments of the protagonist's imagination, then that takes away so many of the possible clues that we could draw towards being like possible sequels or DLC. So like I don't think we can, I don't know. If they say anything meaningful, but we can't trust it, that seems like a waste of dialogue then. And I don't think necessarily that the creators or the writer of this game intends us to think that comedy and tragedy are, and I'm referring to the masks. They seem to talk to each other with those tags referring to one another.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that the writer of the game wants us to believe to some extent that these two entities exist in some form outside of the main character's imagination.
As either actual physical beings or as metaphysical beings outside of your unreliable narrator of Zero.
And there's the point where when you're making the choice between life and death, that the police actually recognize one of the masked men. So that, I don't know, it's very bizarre. I have a feeling that like, you know what? I actually have a feeling that maybe they don't fully know what the hell they're going to do with this story.
Yeah, I think there is enough like up in the air that they can essentially make a second game and choose how to stick it on that one.
Did you go to the last tape when you finished the game?
The last tape.
So
there's a tape that comes up after you complete the game on the replay. Yeah, I did do that.
And you see like the different weapons that you might have collected throughout the game.
I got a broadsword that lets me cut through bullets instead of reflect them.
I got that, and I got like essentially the Master Sword from Zelda where it shoots projectiles.
What? I don't know how to unlock them. I wanna do it myself without looking into it, but
I haven't dug that deep yet.
Mm-hmm.
But the last door says like wait a couple months or like wait a while and maybe this will unlock. So it certainly seems to indicate that either a sequel or DLC is potentially in the works or planned to be in the works. I don't know. I'm torn because I think the narrative as a whole is strong, but it really does, as you put it, like it really does feel that your player agency was never really there to begin with.
Right, but when you have the illusion that you did have it previously, especially with how active the dialogue system is, being able to interrupt, and it seems like I get that not all of the responses are opening new paths in the conversation. Like you definitely have normally 3 options. I don't know if you actually get any more options, but you have 3 or fewer to choose from in any dialogue, and normally it seems like, especially when I've replayed a section or two, that they may skew, not always, but they may skew into at least 1 or 2 different responses from whoever you're talking to. All of those times in which you navigate the conversation in different directions, where you feel like you're actually, like your response is actually choosing what dialogue prompt or what dialogue is coming next. Like it feels really worthless when you find out, oh, I think the game was going to lead me to this point no matter what. And also the single choice to take, I think it's Tragedy's offer to die, where the game's just like roll credits, and not in a near automata way where then you get like a rewind. It's just like, well, you've beaten, quote unquote, Katana 0.
Yeah, there's nothing satisfying about that ending.
No, it feels very cheap and unexpected. Like I don't know if it's intended to like blindside you. Like, no, that's not the right choice, because there are games that totally do that, where it's like, young hero, do you want to go on this adventure? And then you can say no, and then the game, like 5 minutes after you've booted it up, rolls you back to the beginning. It's like you didn't want to go on the adventure. Yeah, it's weird. The illusion of choice makes the recognition that you don't have it, I think, more upsetting than if you know from the start that your actions don't matter. Because I definitely thought that my choices were mattering. I was choosing not to kill like the policeman in the prison when obviously it was already too late, right? I was already going to get blamed for like 40 or 50 policemen being dead in the prison already.
But you can choose not to kill the policeman on your escape, right? And that's
Exactly.
fine.
And that's what I'm saying is I chose not to kill them, which is it's I think more challenging honestly because they do line them up where they should be very easy to get rid of if you choose the violent option.
Like the only choice that seemed to have any sort of emotional return to me was the fact that I went through the elaborate explanation of Zero's cosplay to the first receptionist in like one of your first missions.
Right, it's a bathrobe and you're just going to take a shower and showers can be dangerous, so that's why you have your sword.
Well, and she I don't know if your receptionist in your playthrough ended up getting killed or not, but if she's alive, she ends up appearing at the
As
last
a receptionist,
stage.
yeah, for the other area.
Yeah, and kind of like it's like maybe we could watch it together sometime. And you're like, yeah, okay, later. But
Wait, you explained it as a cosplay.
yeah, I explained it as a cosplay, and
I explained
told
it
her,
as a bathrobe, and she's like, oh, okay. Why do you have a sword then? And you're like, showers can be dangerous. And she's like, okay, we'll have a good shower. And so you go in and you come out and you literally have blood on you. And the officer confronts you and says, you know, like, you stop right there. And she goes, no, he was just going in for a shower. And then the officer says, like, he has blood on him. And you're like, no, this is like bathing product. And and she's like, yeah, no, it's true. He said he was going to take a shower. And so the police officer lets you go. But if you decide later, like, if you can also say it's a cosplay to the cop, she'll interject. She'll be like, you told me it was a bathrobe. And then the cop becomes hostile for you. So there are like, and that's the thing is like there are micro decisions you can make, like sparing that robot in the the studio space gets you an achievement and gives you some like funny and unique dialogue, but it still feels kind of worthless compared to the overall story having like absolutely no interest or care as to how you choose to act. And your character has very different ways in which they can express themselves. From the impatient, like, I won't bother to, like, take any dialogue from anyone, all the way to, like you're saying, the very, like, supplicant, like, patient going through the therapy sessions, talking to people, being, being more warm and, like, conversational. Like, or you can just be confrontational in all of your conversations, not cut them short, but play like a moody, aggressive bad guy. But no matter what, it all washes out the same. And like that doesn't feel that good.
And I found myself, it's weird because the game allows you to some extent to mold and shape the character's personality after yourself or your choices, rather.
Mm-hmm.
And the character seems to be reasonable enough at times if you choose to play him that way. But like when faced with the situations that like I personally would want to change the most, like the unnamed Null, I say unnamed because I don't think we ever get a number for him or code name. The guy with the laser beam, like
that's a fun fight.
Yeah, it's absolutely fun, but it's absolutely unnecessary. Like,
yeah,
what was the point of that fight? It wasn't to, like, at this point you're no longer following the psychiatrist.
Mm-hmm.
You're just there, and maybe the justification is that guy doesn't want to let you live. But like at this point, you know that he's the same as you, and isn't there any possibility to cooperation?
Yeah, you both have the same grievances, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, granted, you remove that fight, and the game, like, I think loses maybe its high point of the entire playthrough. The dragon tape was really good. When you find the security tape, because all of that footage is missing,
mm-hmm.
I honestly was hoping for it to be for it to drop some bomb or something. Like, I was wondering, is it going to be the main character that like went through beforehand too, and like he's having some sort of weird thing where he doesn't even remember what he's doing?
Mm-hmm.
at points throughout the day. But I mean, it made up for it for the fact that like playing as Dragon with the whole like laser
The
or not
dash.
laser, but like straight line dash attack.
The dash is cool.
Yeah, like on it, it kind of feels unrewarding from the fact that like as soon as you get done with that tape, you're back to playing as your Virgin Zero.
Mm-hmm.
And it like now you really just want to play through the whole game as the Chad 15.
It's so true that like I didn't really use, because up till that point I felt you almost didn't have to use your powers at all, and so I very rarely did. And then once I got the dash option, I was like, nah, I'm gonna use this power. This power feels real good.
Yeah.
And then I went back to Zero and I was like, well, now that I don't have a dash, I feel like obligated to use the other power since it's all I've got.
Like some of these fights are getting hard enough that maybe I have to actually slow down time.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's true. Like I actually did most of the boss fights where, I may have had to activate the slowdown less than 5 times in the fight, but it was like there were specific spots in the fight that even if I knew exactly what was coming and what I needed to execute, I needed the extra time from the slowdown to like do it. Especially that laser fight. There were just a couple times where it's like I can do this action individually without using any slowdown, but in the in the greater context of chaining this action right after being forced into a different position in real time and then preparing for like the next thing that's about to come in real time from the tail of this action, I have to slow down. Otherwise I can't execute it on my keyboard fast enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, good combat. I feel very similar to you. Like I am not sure if I come out positive or negative on the story maybe until it's resolved.
I kind of feel like we're not necessarily playing the good guy of the story. But I'm also not really sure like what every side wants. It seems like V was absolutely like a sadistic piece of shit.
Yeah, I'm fine with V being dead.
But there's a possibility that like the people that they're actually working for, well, they're trying to recreate Kronos. It seems like the only person that might be doing it for the right reason per se, but with very bloody methods is 15.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you might want a positive thing, but if that means you're going to sacrifice so many lives, like maybe it's not worth it. And ultimately you kill so many people as Zero as well. It leaves me kind of, I don't know. I'm just questioning everything about the story right now. Like, I still want to believe that the girl is alive. The fact that they allude to the fact that they have taken her makes me think that, or that the girl even exists. But there's a possibility that like the girl's nature is not necessarily either thing that we think it could be. Her existing like in a sense of like her being alive and a person that is the daughter of the next door neighbor and there's a conspiracy, or her being a creation of his memories. Like I don't necessarily think it has to be one of those two things. But I'm also wondering if I'm maybe giving too much credit to the writers to have something that is, unforeseen so far.
Yeah, we're right now stuck in, I think, the like balance of, is it going to feel worth it in the very end? And
yeah,
we might have to buy a DLC or another game to find out, and that's it feels like kind of a shitty place to be in.
If the story's resolution is good, then I'll feel fine with it. And on the other side, if the DLC or next game happens to be a bunch of 15 gameplay, I think I'll be happy fine anyway, regardless. Yeah.
I actually kind of feel the same way, honestly. And 15 may come off right now as like essentially a like revenge-driven anti-hero, but I think there's enough room in his story to pivot as well. Like I really like to think about how sequel games, especially when they set up an anti-hero or an antagonist, have the opportunity to do something wild like Golden Sun and Golden Sun 2, where it's just like, okay, remember that bad guy, quote unquote, from the first game? He's your protagonist for game number 2. Like, I love those switch ups and those curveballs. They're just satisfying to like kind of get turned on your head. And in a story like this where everything's up in the air, it could be very interesting to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It would be very fun to have the sort of what do you call it? The gold, the not gold, the silver versus red fight from like Pokemon Gold and Silver, where the like the OG character from the first time you play is now your that's your antagonist. That is who you compete with. The only problem is that we know mechanically 0 to be weaker than 15 right now.
I think that's all I have to say for that, for Katana Zero, though.
Yeah, me too.
And probably all I have left for Fancy Ramen episode 142. You can write into podcast@fancyramen.com.
We have a Twitch channel at twitch.tv, Fancy Ramen TV. Cookie also plays at Cookie Skimilk on Twitch. That's CUKISKMILK. And our buddy John plays at JFray All Day. That is JAYFRAY.
And as always, tell a friend, leave a review, and do whatever it is you do.
Thank you so much.
Have a great week, everyone, or maybe sooner. We'll see you later.
Bye.